It is our pleasure now to welcome in the man who controls women's college basketball bracketology for ESPN. His name is Charlie Creme, returning to the program. Good morning, Charlie. Great to talk with you.
Oh, good to be back with you guys. Yes, and good morning to you.
It's fantastic to see BYU on that 3-seed line as well. Not going to lie, the Cougars have worked hard to get there, but not always is a winning team going to climb as fast as they have. So why are the metrics, the net basketball rankings and whatnot, in favor of BYU right now so that they are on the 3-seed line already?
I think the big thing with seeding and net rankings and going back years and before we had the net, it's the schedule. You have to play a good schedule in the non-conference, especially if you're in a league like the WCC that doesn't have a ton of depth to it. You're not going to get a lot of tournament-worthy teams in your conference season, so you have to go out and schedule. And BYU's done that this year. And then you have to produce against that schedule. BYU's also done that. You put those two things together, and then teams outside the Power 5 or 6 conferences have a chance to make some noise, to get a higher seed, to let the metrics sort of speak for themselves. And that's happened this season. It's kind of all come together perfectly for BYU. But it comes down to who you play and beating who you play. And BYU's done really well on both fronts.
Well, and I think that's something that Jeff Judkins has done a great job of, not just recently where there does seem to be much more emphasis on strength of schedule. He has always been a guy that's been willing to go and schedule tough teams early. But to your point, this is the year that not only do you get the really tough schedule, but you have the results to back it up. And that's something that could propel this team to quite honestly, a really special year.
Absolutely, because not only does it put them in position for a higher seed, which is special, it's super special if it becomes high enough as to where I project them to be right now, inside those top 16 teams or a top 4 seed, and get to host a couple of games in the first couple of rounds. That's super special. That's something that every program really shoots for at the beginning of the season. If it's not a national championship goal that they're talking about, kind of next level stuff is, hey, can we get a top 4 seed and host a couple of games? So just in that respect alone, we're looking at the possibility of this being kind of a special March. But also going out there and playing those teams prepares you for when you do get into the tournament, because that's all you're going to be playing outside of probably the first round. That's all you're going to be playing the rest of the way is teams like BYU scheduled earlier in the year, teams like Washington State or Arizona State or Oklahoma. So they're ready. Not only did it reward them with a good seed, but they're ready to actually do some damage in the tournament as well.
Charlie Creme of ESPN Women's College Basketball, the Bracketologist, is with us on BYU Sports Nation. We had an inkling of what this BYU team was capable of last year, taking a very good Arizona team that went to the national championship game down to the wire in the second round. So, Charlie, having seen that, is this surprising at all to you to see what BYU has done because they brought everybody back?
Well, it's not entirely surprising. I mean, I did have them projected as a easy tournament team, as the favorite in the WCC, and really thought that they would be a team, to kind of keep an eye on as a team that could get to a second weekend in the tournament. But keeping an eye on it and then being a favorite, which is kind of where they've put themselves in position to be now, are two different things. I didn't see 3 seed on January 27th. I saw, as I probably projected them in the beginning of the season, something like a 6 seed. So this is a step up from where I thought they'd be. And I think a lot of people as well. I don't think they were projected to be deep into the top 25 like they are in the AP rankings. And I certainly didn't think that as we're heading into February that we'd be talking about them possibly hosting those first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament.
Charlie, we've spent a lot of time talking about the strength of schedule and just who BYU has played and beaten. What are the metrics telling you is BYU's best win? Which victory is helping the Cougars out the most at this point?
Gosh, that's a good question, because it's more of a collection with them. But I'd say Utah at this point, because Utah's net ranking is way up there as well. Arizona State's kind of fluttering on the bubble, just on the outside right now. But the way I look at it, and I hope some of the committee members look at it, is we have a collection of teams that we're analyzing, and how did you perform as one of those teams against other tournament worthy or quality teams? Doesn't necessarily mean teams that are that are definitely in the tournament, but just teams that are worthy of consideration. What's your record against those teams? And in BYU's case, they have about 4 or 5 of those wins. And the best team they played, Oklahoma, they went to overtime against, and that was a fantastic game. By the way, just as an aside, wow, that was a great game. So that's the way I look at it. I think that's the way some of the committee members look at it as well. Because what you're doing is you're trying to put the best teams in the tournament in the best positions based on their resumes. And what a better way to view a team than how they do against teams that are actually also would be in the tournament or would be considered in the tournament. So that's the way I kind of look at it. And when you take all these other pieces to the puzzle together, but when it comes right down to it, how did you play against tournament caliber teams? And the Utah, I'll point to that one, is probably the best win. But with BYU, it's more of a collective against what was a good non-conference schedule that included a lot of those teams.
He is Charlie Creme. He is a bracketology rock star for ESPN, discussing BYU women's basketball right now. And when you look at what BYU is right now, a 3 seed, and again, this is a fantastic scenario for Jeff Judkins and his squad. But based on what they have left on the schedule, a couple of tougher games against Gonzaga, but not much else on paper, how high or how much higher can BYU realistically climb?
I think 3 might be the ceiling. 2 would need some help. It's kind of a double-edged sword, right? BYU doesn't have a lot of losses left on its schedule, with the possibility of maybe losing one of those games to Gonzaga, maybe losing a game in the WCC tournament. However, they don't have a lot of resume building games in there either. So the record's going to be fantastic, and they're not going to lose ground necessarily, but gaining ground is going to be hard because all the teams in front of them where they could lose are also playing other games where when they win them, they're beefing up their resume. So kind of pushing past, like for right now, I have BYU as a 3 seed, but I have them as the last 3 seed, so number 12 overall.
Sure.
So they'd have to get to the 2 line, they have to push through 4 other teams. And those 4 other teams almost on a nightly basis now, or certainly on a weekly basis, are playing resume building type games. So even a loss can be counteracted by a win. And usually a win, the value of a win is better than or weighs more than what a loss does to you. So those teams just have a better chance of either maintaining or improving their position. So it's going to be tough for BYU to kind of crack any higher, but with the right help and with enough losses in front of them, a 2 seed isn't impossible.
Charlie, last thing, and let's take this from just BYU and expand it out to the West Coast Conference. On the men's side, we're talking about the possibility that maybe the WCC is a 4-bid league. On the women's side of things, what's the chance that the West Coast Conference is a multi-bid league?
I think it's decent. I mean, remember we're talking about there's 68 teams in the field this year, which is new. So there's 4 more at-large spots up for grabs. And if it's BYU and Gonzaga, let's play it out to where they both make the WCC tournament championship game, and Gonzaga doesn't lose. It probably would help the conference a little bit more if Gonzaga could get one of those games against BYU.
Yeah,
it might hurt BYU's seed ultimately, but to be honest, if they're a 3 or a 4, they're still hosting games. They're still in good position to do some damage in the tournament, but it also benefits Gonzaga's chance of getting into the field. Because right now I have Gonzaga right there on the bubble. What's also benefiting the chances of the WCC being a multi-bid league is that some of the middle of the pack or even, lower end of the SEC, for instance, and the ACC aren't playing particularly well. Teams like Texas A&M and Kentucky in the SEC, who we all thought were going to be easy tournament teams, no problem. They're really struggling. So with 4 more spots available to at-large teams and some of the larger conferences maybe not having the depth of bids that we thought they were going to get, opens up some opportunities. And Gonzaga would be a team that could walk into that opportunity.
Charlie, we appreciate and respect so much what you do. We know how busy you are, traveling man, with everything that's going on. So thanks for taking some time with us. And I'm guessing that we'll probably be talking to you again before we get to the bracket, if you're all right with that.
I am very okay with that, but I look forward to it. It'd be great. Talking BYU hoops is a lot of fun. This team is a real enjoyable watch.
Fantastic stuff. Charlie, thanks so much for your time.
You got it, guys.